Edition of the One Hood Power Hour. My name is Kahari Mosley, of course, and I am here with my co-host Miracle Jones and Ryan White. We're really excited to be here tonight. We're going to be featuring an incredible array of women leaders. Tonight's theme is Women in Leadership, Making a Difference in the Face of Adversity. And we're going to have four dynamic leaders that we'll be talking about. Before we get into that, definitely, a lot going on in the world. But I did have just one fun thing because, as we mentioned last night on the Sunday night sit down, today is my birthday, and my hot take is 45 years ago today, on the same day that I was born, George Lucas and company began filming on the movie Star Wars, which everyone knows is my favorite movie of all time, my favorite movie franchise. So I thought that was an interesting fun fact that, literally Star Wars and I were born on the same day, which makes sense that, we fit so well together. So that's what I got, I wanted to keep it light, it's my birthday, So
yes, the whole Star Wars franchise was created just so you could do your show, so you could sign up, so you could wear, your exclusive limited edition Pittsburgh jersey. Like, happy birthday! How's your day been so far?
It's been good. It actually just, really just getting a lot of work done. I'm looking forward to having a meal with my family, a little bit later. But yeah, no, just gonna keep it. Obviously, with the pandemic, you gotta keep it chill. So, nothing too crazy. Yeah. So Ryan, what's your hot take for tonight?
Yeah, I wish I had something as optimistic and light as you were keeping it with that. I guess, one thing I can start off with that's, optimistic in some sense, is that I think it was today, yeah, but sometime this week, that teachers and staff in Pittsburgh public schools, they were able to get enough of them vaccinated to at least have a lot of the teachers and staff return to the buildings, in advance of some of the students starting to return in the next few weeks. So, kind of nearing the end of the school year anyway, but, it's a good sign that we'll at least be able to get at least some in-person instruction for some of the students that need it most this year. So that's a really good thing, assuming they're able to do it, as safely as possible and everything. And one other thing I did have too, which I think was unexpected from a lot of people last week, was, County Executive Rich Fitzgerald vetoing County Council's, bill to establish paid sick leave for a lot of employees. And, his reason for vetoing, he said he was in support of paid sick leave, but his reason for vetoing is actually legal concerns about, how the bill was proposed and passed and everything like that.
Right.
And so then I would really just have questions, both for him and for County Council, because, this is something they've been working on in that capacity since I believe last April. So, if he did have legal concerns about this process, I don't know why he would wait, almost a full calendar year until the actual vote on the bill to bring it up. And then, my questions for County Council too were, if he had brought it up previously, why wasn't there more of an effort to address that? Or, just in general, if it was believed that there was some legal concern about the process of this passing, of them passing it this way, why would they not look into that or change their approach at any point during this 11-month almost a full year period. Yeah, so not as light as Kahari's hot take. Yeah, that's just a disappointing thing from last week that hopefully we can get some more clarity on.
Absolutely, and Miracle. Anything else you wanted to share before we get into our wonderful array of guests tonight?
I mean, there's so much going on in the world. There was been a couple of incidents downtown with violence. We're going to have Judy coming on a little bit later, talk about how we can all come together and really push back as a community against the hate and violence. And so there's a lot. I know it's heavy for a lot of folks. We have the DC statehood bill going on nationally at the congressional level, and there's been a lot of interesting dialogue around there, a lot of dog whistles there. But some of the things that are, I guess, brighter spots is that people have been getting their stimulus checks. There's been a lot of issues with banks and different outages and system failures, but people are supposed to be this week getting for stimulus checks. We had a round of vaccinations going out this past week. We were at One Hood very lucky and fortunate to partner with Central Wellness Outreach and got a little over, I believe, over 100 folks vaccinated this past weekend. So there's been a lot of stuff going on. So just a reminder, people, guys, staying tuned. On top of that, we got elections. It's election season. All the judicial candidates. We're still having rallies, but COVID-19 is actually, we're seeing a resurgence of cases. So the numbers are increasing a little bit. And so to remind people, stay masked up. Even if you have the vaccine, it takes 2 weeks to really be effective, and you need to have both shots if we're doing the Pfizer and Moderna. So please, 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 it's spring break. We're seeing all the pictures and videos of folks without masks. So just please be very careful and understand that it may get worse again before it gets better, just because of people just going out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then one last thing that I said before we, talk about who's going to be joining us tonight. As you said, local, races are picking up. There was a number of significant, endorsements over the last week. We're not going to get into all of them, but for those who are following the local races, organizations, from across the spectrum are beginning to weigh in. And I think that's, something that we all, need to pay attention to, as we are, roughly a little less than 2 months away from Election Day, but probably a matter of weeks away from, for those who requested mail ballots to begin receiving those in the mail as the ballots positions have been cast, and Democratic voters in Allegheny County will have upwards of 40 names to choose from. So make sure you page through all the list of names, and and make sure you don't forget anybody, because that's going to be quite the process of leafing through 40 names while in the voting booth. But that's something that Allegheny voters, are going to have to do. And as we, segue to tonight's, panel, I want to mention everyone that's going to be joining us tonight, and then we're going to jump into our first guest. But joining us, tonight is Alyssa Lyon from EcoDistricts. She's the director of Black Environmental Collective, UrbanKind Institute. Dr. Crystaline Barger, manager of youth workforce experience at Partner for Work. Judy Sue from the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. And joining us first tonight, we're very honored to have as a guest the newly minted mayor of Rankin Borough in Allegheny County, Joelisa McDonald. We're very, very excited to join us, who was very, very recently installed as the mayor over in Rankin and Borough. And for those who are joining us, from around the state, Rankin Borough is a community east of the city of Pittsburgh within Allegheny County, a community with a very large African-American population. one of the largest African-American populations of any municipality in Allegheny County. And we are honored to have, again, the newly minted mayor of Rankin Borough, Joelisa McDonald. Thank you for joining us, Mayor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And before we get into the nitty gritty, you talk to us a little bit about your journey to the mayor's office. How did this process come about? And for those who are unaware, how these things sometimes happen. How did it start, and how did you officially become the new mayor of Rankin Borough?
So for me particularly, it's been in the process for quite some time. I'd say over the past 2 years, I've been considering to run for mayor, but timing isn't always on our side. And I always tell people that I work on God's time. So once I had learned that our now current, our previous mayor rather, was going to resign, I felt like what better opportunity to seek after an appointment, being as though that I had started this year off knowing that I was going to be running for mayor in the 2021 primary. So what had happened was he, had submitted his resignation, and I submitted a letter of approval. And I'm so glad that you asked this, because that's the number one question that I've been getting is how this just came out of nowhere. And people are like, how did you become the mayor without an election? I submitted a letter to our borough council asking for them to appoint me as the new mayor. My letter was heard through council, and they took a vote on it, and ultimately everyone voted in my favor, and here I am.
Miracle, do you have a follow-up?
First of all, congratulations. I know it's like you've been a lot and you've been hitting the ground running from some of your social media posts. So my question is, we always talk about when you are in office, the first 100 days. So for you, what are some of the priorities that you have with the administration? And I know people are still getting involved in the running of the borough, but what are some of the priorities and opportunities that you see as the new mayor?
Honestly, one of my first orders of business is to get acquainted in my role and to meet with our borough council, because ultimately I need their support in all the plans that I have to move Rankin forward. Outside of that, I am head of the police department, so I have met with them and will continue to meet with them to see what ways I can best serve them. And then moving along from the police department, I want to just get out in the community and start introducing myself to the public and our residents and our business partners, to just establish that relationship so that I can start building rapport. So whenever I go to make my moves, everything will kind of already be, the tone will already be set, and we'll all hopefully be all on the same page.
Absolutely. Ryan, we're going to go to Ryan for a follow-up.
Yep. Thanks, Kahari. Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for joining us. And sorry if you kind of answered this already in your first answer. I lost my connection for a second there. But I just was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on, what really spurred your interest in running for mayor, or, seeking that appointment. What are your motivations behind that? Maybe anything in your past experience that pushed you towards doing that.
Yeah, well, I've been in Rankin all my life. I grew up in Hawkins Village. I lived there from the time that I was 3 up until I was 16, and my mom moved us out of the projects. So I've seen Rankin at its best, and I've seen it at its worst. But having grown up in Hawkins Village, and then ultimately after college, during college, I came back and rented my first apartment here. I lived there for 3 years. And then I purchased my first home at the age of 23. I've lived in this home for about 8 years now. And I've only seen things be taken away from our community. We once had a strong community center. We once had a health clinic here. And over time, only things have been taken away. And I'm not okay with that. So I just wanted to kind of sometimes you need to get on the inside to figure out what's going on. So this is my way of kind of getting in on the inside and getting my own hands wet to see if there's something that I can do to fix that and bring us back together and move us forward.
Right. And,
I hope that answers your question.
No, definitely. And, for me, when I think about, towns like Rankin, and Braddock, and I feel like they're so often, overlooked. And in many ways, as smaller, cities, face many of the same challenges that a Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or, Harrisburg, Allentown or Bethlehem, may face. Will you, as a mayor who now is going to have to deal with the county, who's now going to have to deal with state lawmakers, that would be the primary kind of avenues in which to bring resources back, into Rankin. What is your message, to them about, what types of priorities they need to have, as county leaders and as state leaders, to support, the Rankins and, and the Aliquippas and the Braddocks and these other, towns that have a lot of great infrastructure, have a lot of great history, but, over the last, like you said, 20, 30 years, have maybe seen, the rougher side, of the mountain. What are things that they can do from a policy perspective to help that turnaround?
I mean, honestly, we've just been looked over so much. So even just talking about it, just having those conversations is what's going to bring light to what's going on here. We're hoping to get the county support when it comes to redevelopment. Rankin has, and I was going to speak to this a little bit later in our conversation, but Rankin has a lot of land that can be used for economic development. So I hope that we'll have our lawmakers support when it comes to that, and we can all kind of just come together and have those conversations.
Right. Miracle, did you have another question?
Yeah. So just like following up on some of the things you just brought up, you were talking about like the investment, something like is that more of like a public-private partnership you're looking at?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yes, when you're talking about, you said the land. So are you talking about more about like public-private partnerships? Are you talking about like building more apartments? Is there like a specific vision that you have for the community?
At this time, we've been at such a standstill that we're open to really any opportunity. It's almost as if we're just desperate for that opportunity. So if that means bringing on some apartment complexes, some type of residential development, then so be it. We would obviously love some businesses because we have next to none. But it's whatever. The property is there for anyone to kind of take advantage of. We would love to have some developers ultimately, because that would bring jobs back. So our hope is for more so on a business side, but the table is open for whatever.
Ryan, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you real quick, for anyone, that may not be as familiar with you or your past work, if you just wanted to talk a little bit at all about, I know you already spoke a lot on your lived experiences in the community, but just, any past work or professional experience you have, or even just like your unique perspective as the first Black female mayor of Rankin, anything like that you can really draw from and you feel like has prepared you for this line of work.
Just being in the community, I feel like, is what ultimately prepared me to be in this position. I do a lot of volunteer work. I sit on local boards, and also just my character. I'm a very open-minded individual. I'm compassionate about what I do. I only sign myself up for things that I can fully commit to, and I just have a love for all people. And a lot of people put emphasis on technical skills, but they forget the basis of those. The human needs. So for me, that's what I like to be known for. That's what I like to put out in the atmosphere. It's just, again, just being open-minded and compassionate, and just the love for all people. No one will be left behind here.
Thank you for that. Miracle, did you have one final question?
Yes, and again, thank you so much for your time. Again, congratulations on your appointment. Like Ryan said, you are the first Black woman to run the city of Rankin. How excited are you to be in this position, and like, what do you look forward to as mayor? Like, what is the one thing that you're looking forward to being able to accomplish during your tenure?
I'm really excited. I've obviously never been mayor before. I joke, that's my running joke, because people are like, well, what are you going to do? Or I'm like, well, I've never been mayor before, so I have to figure it out. I plan to, take it, move along as I go along. My appointment, one thing that I just wanted to put out there in closing is, it just shows that women can be in leadership, and that we are moving past skin color being a determining factor in being in leadership role. I hope that I can encourage other young leaders to emerge, and just be the light and the voice for change overall. But I'm definitely excited. I think my community is excited. I hope that they're excited. I also wanted to point out that this was an appointment, so I do still have to run in May's primary in order to keep my seat. But right now, I'll be sitting in the seat until December, and I plan to just, again, build those relationships with our residents, our community partners, our businesses, and our council, and just try to strategize. I like to work on a horizontal scale and see how and what are the best ways that we can bring some light to our community, and that we can move it forward, bring some revenue back. And one good thing is that our crime is down, and I like to give COVID a little bit of credit to that. But yeah, just ultimately just trying to shed some light and just be a positive voice for everyone.
Well, thank you so much. And for those who are just joining us, we just had a very in-depth conversation with the newly minted mayor of Rankin Borough in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, Mayor Joelisa McDonald. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you very soon and hearing more about your plans and vision and all the wonderful things you'll be doing in Rankin. So thank you for joining us again, Mayor Joelisa McDonald from Rankin Borough.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome stuff. So I think that just another example of the trend that we've been talking about a lot on the show is more and more African-American women getting involved in civic engagement. As someone who got involved, in politics in my early 20s, who is now in my mid 40s, I've seen the transformation. And it is, definitely a sight for sore eyes, for sure. And definitely look forward to hearing more, about all the wonderful things that will be happening in Rankin, Pennsylvania. So now we're going to go to our next guest, Dr. Crystaline Barger, from who's the manager of youth work experience at A Partner for Work. And we're very, very excited to have her joining us as well. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you. So I'm going to pass it off to Miracle to ask the first question.
Yes. So how our last guest, Mayor Juelisa, was referencing is COVID has had a huge impact on communities. One of the impacts has been around youth development and the job market. And so what are some of the things that Partner for Work is doing, and what are some of the ways that people can get involved in some of your programming?
Absolutely. So I just want to give you a little information regarding our Learn and Earn Summer Youth Employment Program. That's the best way that I can answer that question at the current moment, as well as kind of give you a little information about our year-round programming. So our Learn and Earn Summer Youth Employment Program is a youth employment program of the county executive, Richard Fitzgerald, and the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, William Peduto, that is managed by Partner for Work, the Workforce Development Board for Allegheny County. It is a program for youth between the ages of 14 to 24 who are residents of Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh who are of low income. It is a program provided in two components. One is our general program for youth ages 14 to 21 and our corporate internship program for young adults ages 18 to 24. Youth have the opportunity to learn, earn a wage, and be exposed to the world of work and different career paths. And so that's something we do during the summer. Our application just opened last week for our general program. Our corporate internship application has been open since January and will close on April 2nd. The general program will close May 31st. And so we're really trying to get everybody revved up for the Summer Youth Employment Program for this summer. It definitely is a positive experience for young adults and youth to engage themselves in for the summer rather than other things. And then year around, we have programming that our organization funds with state and federal funding and private funding that provides training programs during the school year and exposure programs during the school year to help keep the youth connected to the workforce, prepared for and connected and jump started into the workforce. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that was great information. You know, as someone, in my former life has done some, workforce development work. Could you talk a little bit about, why it's so important? I think, a lot of times folks, look at workforce development as solely just training, and maybe, a benefit is just, we might, get folks, into some in-demand jobs in the region and things like that. But could you talk about some of the ancillary benefits to society, that only those really in the workforce development world are really trying to connect to beyond just, taking person A and putting them into job B?
Absolutely. And so one of our main components is that we want every member of the Pittsburgh region's workforce to be connected to the workforce. But we don't want you to just be connected to the workforce. We want you to go after your goal, your dream, your desire. And so if you're looking to be in a high in-demand occupation of IT, if you want to engage in transportation logistics, if you want to engage in childcare, if you want to engage in the finance industry, we want you to be equipped to go after that which you desire to go after. In example, we have a BankWorks program where several banks have come together and they're doing a training program to provide entry-level experience for persons within the Pittsburgh region who want to be in the banking industry. And so again, typically you say, well, I need a job, go and complete an application and just get a job. But when you talk about doing workforce development, you are giving people the tools, the training, the equipment that they need in order to go after the job that they really desire to engage in.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We're going to go to Ryan with a follow-up.
Yep. Thanks, Kahari, and thank you for joining us, Dr. Barger.
My pleasure.
Just wanted to kind of follow up on what you were just talking about. I know you mentioned banking and a couple other areas where you've been able to connect youth and young adults with these opportunities. So could you just talk about some of your other, whether it be corporate partners, nonprofit, just other organizations? I believe when I started at One Hood a couple summers ago, we also had a few interns that were paired through that program. So just talking about more so like the range of different opportunities that individuals are able to gain experience in and get some experience there.
Absolutely. So through our Summer Learn and Earn program, we have several partners throughout the Pittsburgh region. For the general program, we have 22 programs or organizations that we partner with this year to be the employers of record. And they're providing opportunities for young people ages 14 to 21, where they're really doing horizon broadening experiences. And so they're giving them that first level experience of what it means overall to complete that application and then engage in a almost like an onboarding experience and training experience where they're exposing young people to the responsibility of being an employee. And so learning how to do troubleshooting and things of that nature. But then they are also partnering with several businesses, local business partners throughout Allegheny County, whether it be mom and pop shops, whether it be the Fudge Farm or other retail type shops, whether it be a hair store, whether it be a youth center. Young adults are engaging in summer camps and working and learning how to engage with people by starting with engaging with young people not far from their age as summer camp counselors. But then they're also being exposed to IT. They're being exposed to architecture. They're being exposed to a wide range of different career paths that young adults can engage in, at the same time gaining the experience of what does it mean to be an employee every day, earning a paycheck, and not just earning a paycheck, but actually doing work to put that earn in the word earn a paycheck, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I just had a quick question before we jump back to Miracle. You know, when I was involved in workforce development stuff, and this was almost close to 20 years ago now, you know, there was a conversation regionally about a skills gap. You know, and it was a perception that, you know, even at the time that, you know, there weren't jobs in the region, you know, but it seemed like experts were saying there was jobs in the region, but we just had a disconnect between the jobs that were available and the skills that people needed to fill those jobs. Has there been any ground gained in that area, or is that still a challenge that folks like in your world doing workforce development are still wrestling with? Absolutely.
So there still is work, but there has been some gains. And so my encouragement is to everyone who is watching today and anyone who will watch the playback to definitely visit the Partner for Work website. A lot of resources are there, and really trying to get as many people connected to the workforce as possible, and providing those apprenticeship training programs and apprenticeship training programs so that those gaps can be filled, so that when in-demand corporations are coming to us or industries are coming to us and saying, hey, we have, you know, these jobs we're trying to fill in 2021 and 2022, though we can really begin that pool of those who are prepared to go into those areas, So we're gaining a lot of strength, but we definitely could use a little bit more strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because we're talking about the variety of opportunities that are out there, because I think sometimes people just assume, oh, workforce development, it's going to be just a couple of weeks and there's no way that I can get hired or retained. But you all over at Partner for Work have created a whole like system of network to not only develop work skills, but also make sure that people get hired after. So can you talk about some of the other things that you do with this youth program and some of the benefits for youth to come in through your program?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, the Learn and Earn General program is that beginning level experience for youth ages 14 to 21. And so they're getting that, what does it mean to work my first job? But then also we're equipping them. So from 15 to 21, you're getting further equipping. And then that corporate internship program really is that experience where we are partnering with major corporations and programs throughout Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh, where they are hiring our interns on as employees. And so they are assigning them tasks and work responsibilities, just like they would their employees. And they are entrusting them, you know, to ask questions, to complete their work, and to really give back product that pulls on their skills, their abilities, and that helps corporations and businesses to push their mission, you know, throughout the summer. But then also projects that they will start that those corporations will take on beyond that. And so the Learn and Earn program really is creating that pipeline by starting early in training our young people and then building them to that corporate internship program so they can put those experiences on their resume. One of the things I like to tell my interns, but then also the corporate host as well, is that I'm really working on a program that prepares young people and Partner for Work is part of the program, to prepare young adults to be able to apply for positions once they graduate from school, whether that be a trade school, whether that be college, whether they're going straight from high school into employment experience. I want them to be able to have an experience that they put on their resume. They can present to the corporation in the interview and say, I am the candidate that you are looking for because I've done X, Y, and Z. So they can no longer receive that statement that we all have received. You don't have enough experience. You need a little bit more time, or you need a little bit more experience. Let's kill that myth, because a lot of our young people are doing amazing work, and amazing work that's quality level, employee already level, within our summer youth employment programs across the United States.
Absolutely. And we're go to Ryan for final question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dr. Barger.
My pleasure.
I just wanted to ask real quick, if you had any specific, practices or programs in place to really focus on recruiting like an overall more diverse and inclusive group of prospective employees. And then likewise, if you had, any practices in place to encourage all these different companies and organizations that you partner with, to institute more diverse and inclusive hiring practices as well.
Absolutely. So at Partner for Work, we absolutely believe in a diverse workforce. And so with the Learn to Earn Corporate Internship Program and Learn to Earn General Program, we do not discriminate based upon sex, religion, age, sexual orientation, identity. And that is the same across the board. Even for our programs that we're funding, apprenticeship programs. We're also, one of our major partners that we're responsible for is the PA Career Link. And so we are but we work with them to ensure that they are also working under that guise as well. We have become one of the workforce development boards, one of the only ones that has a DEI committee. And so we are looking internally first. And we're looking at practices and policies that we have internally that may not fall in line as tightly as we would want them to fall in line. That's not considerate of the differences of who we are as an organization, as employees. But then we're also creating policies and ways of encouraging those who we are partnering with and funding. And extending funding to and procuring and things of that nature to ensure that they are doing the same. And making sure that we're not just looking for people who have college degrees. We're not just looking for people who have a certain skin tone. We're not just looking for people who follow under a traditional mantra, as you will, for employees, but ensuring that every member of the workforce of Allegheny County is connected to the workforce if they want to be connected.
Miracle, did you? I look like you were about to jump in. I'm sorry about that. Well, thank you so much.
I was like, that's amazing, because most places most people do the reverse. They do DEI stuff when they're hiring, and then they're like, okay, let's look inside after. So I think it's very telling of your organization that you're looking internally and externally at the same time. So thank you for sharing that information.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Really, thank you for having me.
I appreciate the conversation. Can you tell the viewers one more time how to get in touch with Partner for Work?
Absolutely. So Partner for Work, I'm gonna give you a couple of two websites for workforce overall, for adults, for youth, because we don't just service youth, we service adults as well. I want to direct you to the PA Career Link, number one. Number two, I'd like to direct you to www.partnerforwork.org. That is for Partner for Work, the Workforce Development Board for Allegheny County, City of Pittsburgh. But then I also want to direct you to our Learn and Earn Summer Youth Employment Program. And that website is www.jobs4summer.org. And if you have a question and you want to send a question over to us regarding the Learn to Earn program, definitely send us an email to summer@partnerforwork.org.
Okay, summer@partnerforwork.org. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Dr. Barger from Partner for Work, thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to talking to you soon as we get closer, to summer, and we can do a status check and get an update, and if there's any more word we need to get out before that May 31st deadline. Is that correct? May 31st is the deadline for applications?
Yes, young adults, I need you all to apply for internships by April 2nd, but for the general program, May 31st. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for joining us, Dr. Barger from Partner for Work, giving us information about the Learn to Earn program and many other important things we need to know about workforce development here in the greater Pittsburgh area. Yeah. So Miracle, very, very, very important, information, as we, have dealt, with this year-long, pandemic going into the summer. I know there's going to be a lot of interest in keeping young people engaged, and not idle, because we know all of the challenges that come with that, as we, and I'm sure, folks are thinking about, many, many ways to keep the young people, engaged after this year of so much disengagement.
Yes, because we're facing a resource share a skill deficit. So it's very important that we have these programs for our youth, and it's very important that we encourage all of the youth. So if you have any young adults, youth in your life, make sure they're applying, because again, these are not just one-off jobs. These are jobs that have the ability to have long-term impact, and so we want to encourage folks to apply for your family, your friends, your coworkers, children, just everyone. Just make sure they're going and applying to make sure that they're able to take advantage of all the opportunities that are out there for the youth.
Absolutely. And and our next guest, to move to our next guest, actually Miracle, wanted to set it up for you to make the introduction. And we're going to bring someone on who's going to be talking about an issue that's been on the front of Americans' minds, all over the country, particularly in the wake, of what happened, in Georgia, and obviously, Miracle is a Georgia native. So as that incident hit home for all of us, it obviously hits a lot closer, when you're from there. So Miracle, you talk a little bit about, our next guest and, and why you thought it was important, that we hear her story and make sure her voice is heard at a time like this.
Yes, and I do want to preference is that we had actually booked this show before the events of the past week, because there had been a lot of different reports of anti-Asian violence going on for the past 6 months, due to a lot of the stereotyping and a lot of the rhetoric coming from various elected officials. And we here at our organizations were fortunate enough to sign on to a letter of support and solidarity, showing that, as communities who are impacted and under-resourced, we stick up for each other and we stand by each other. But there wasn't a lot of traction for that letter. And so that was why we had originally invited Judy to come on, but just to talk about the letter and ways that we could show up. And then Tuesday happened. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understand that we were already building relationships and community, and that's one of the jobs and responsibilities of organizations and nonprofits, is to engage and support each other. And so with that, I would like to bring on Judy to talk a little bit about what's going on, some of the organizing that's been going on since Tuesday, and the event that's coming up this Wednesday. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Miracle, Ryan, and Kahari, and happy birthday too. And yes, what Miracle just said is true. Like, One Hood was one of 2 media outlets that were interested in this open letter that we had sent out to the community on March 1st. And that just says a lot about alliances and the necessity for alliances to kind of define what is normal in a community. And so what we wanted to do, and why we felt like it was a necessity in the first place, was because we were seeing, the kinds of anti-Asian racism that have always been there, have been there for a really long time, since the 19th century, as a cornerstone of the larger American system of racism. And that kind of, takes violent turns regularly when there are political and economic crises. We wanted to make sure that in Pittsburgh, we had another definition of what is normal, right? normal acts and ways to think when we're seeing anti-Asian violence and other inequities. And, you know, in the beginning of March, we invited our allies to stand with us and to say that we recognize that this is longstanding, it's systemic, and the way that we're going to tackle this is to understand and recognize that anti-Asian racism is tied to anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Latino racism, and we all need to come together and redefine public safety, and we need to reimagine justice from the ground up. So, I mean, from there, you know, we started circulating in the beginning of March, and within 2 days, we had 45 organizations sign on to that, many of which have been with us from the beginning of the founding of our chapter. Many Latino-led orgs, labor organizations, including labor unions, AAPI associations, Black-led orgs, and we just could not be more thankful and looking forward to working even more closely.
Thank you for that. And on our show last night, you know, I you know, just shared some of my thoughts about, you know, the moment, you know, that we're in right now, and one of my hopes was that, you know, it could begin, you know, a larger, you know, conversation, you know, and because much like, you know, in the eastern part of the country, you know, so much of, you know, African American history and African American presence in the eastern part of the United States has been erased, you know, and me and learning more about history, you know, there's so much of that same, you know, phenomena, you know, you know, in the West, and creating this anti-history, you know, of Asians and Asian Americans being in the western part of the United States for decades and decades and decades and decades. And it almost creates, I was talking to one of my Asian American friends, and it also almost creates this false sense of every Asian American, you know, as an immigrant. You know, folks who can go back 5, 6, 7 generations always get asked, so where are you from? You know, and you might have lived in California since the 1840s, you know, much longer than someone else's, maybe, you know, Irish, you know, immigrant, you know, ancestors came in the 1890s, or Italian in the 1920s, still will look at you, you know, as you know, someone, you know, who, you know, is less American, you know, than they are, you know, just, you know, by virtue of the continent that your ancestors come from. And I never really thought about that until they explained it, you know, how that, you know, can make people think, and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is, you know, and we stand up for immigrants' rights, right? That is like the cornerstone of what we do as an organization. And many of us are immigrants. But yeah, there is a definite blind spot in the way that we learn American history and the way that we're taught American history. So much of the infrastructure, the industries, the knowledge, the forms of knowledge and culture on the West Coast are Asian American, right, from the 19th century. So it's really important to know that, and people turn a blind eye towards that. They don't want to see it. They also don't want to see the history of brutality against Asian Americans, right? So when they turn away and they refuse, and even, you know, from the incidents last week, the Atlanta shootings, people are still in denial that it was a hate crime. So that kind of, you know, very deliberate blindness is very much part of the system of American racism overall.
Absolutely. We'll go to Ron for a follow-up.
Yeah, you know, thank you both for that point. You know, that's a really important point to make, just in starting off this conversation. I wanted to ask real quick as well. So you cited in that open letter, or in that letter you had, you know, one hood and a bunch of other organizations signed. You cited a figure from Stop AAPI Hate, that they've, you know, tracked over, I believe it was 2,800 hate incidents in around the last year. You know, and also noted that number in actuality is probably much higher. just from, you know, a lot of those going unreported for a variety of reasons. And you know, even by itself, that's a really large and troubling number. But just to contextualize and emphasize the urgency of this issue, especially over the past year with all the rhetoric around the pandemic, you know, do you have any figures or, you know, percentages of how much that's risen over the past year in comparison to past years? You know, how you know, obviously this is a long-standing problem, but how, you know, especially urgent and widespread this has been as a result of that pandemic rhetoric and other things in the past year.
Yeah, right. First of all, it's such a good reminder for me because I have to go back into the letter and revise that figure because they just revised it upwards of 1,000. So it now stands at 3,800 hate incidents that have been self-reported since March 2020. But yeah, it's so hard to tell, you know, data collection and its connection to, you know, trying to make sure that hate crime legislation is backed up and it's being enforced. Data collection is extremely expensive, as is data analysis. So it's really hard to tell like how much has been elevated, but I can say that, you know, since 2020, anti-Asian racism has been elevating in terms of the level of violence. We've been spit on, we've been punched, we've had acid thrown in our faces, set on fire, stabbed, had our faces slashed, and it keeps getting worse, right? So I think, you know, even without the sort of big data collection, we can definitely see just empirically this is getting worse. And until we can define and take a stand and say this is not normal, and it seems crazy to have to say that, right? This is wrong, this is not normal, until that is understood by every American, it's probably not going to get better, which is very scary.
Right. Miracle?
Yeah. And one of the reasons for the initial letter was to have this community solidarity with this idea that as community members, we keep each other safe. You know, we have to be in relationship with one another to support each other and to prevent things like this from happening. And so there is an event on Wednesday. I don't even call it an event, like a rally, a march on Wednesday. Can you talk a little bit about it? And can you also talk about some of the ways that people have been in solidarity and some of the ways that people need to be in solidarity at this time?
Yeah, there's a march that begins with a rally at 4 p.m. at Shenley Park. And we're co-hosting with the East Coast Asian American Student Union, which is the largest student conference in the country. So we're really looking forward to getting some good turnout for that. As far as, you know, things that people can do right now, right? And in their own lives and moving forward, just immediately, you can, whenever you just hear anti-Asian sentiment, you know, no matter if it's quote unquote not serious, if it's a joke or what have you, you know, you have the power to put a stop to that. If you're silent on it, you're part of the problem, right? So, I mean, that's something everybody can just engage in immediately. The second level is, you know, we really do have to imagine public safety together, right, as a community. The criminal justice system, law enforcement fails us as Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, right? We saw a really ugly concrete instance of that last week with the Atlanta shootings, including the framework that was provided for it by the sheriff, who said, well, the shooter has a sex addiction. He wanted to get rid of temptation. And therefore, you know, and he had a bad day. So that's just what he did. That is definitely part of the problem, right? So criminal justice system, law enforcement, we definitely need to make sure that police budgets are going to community resources and to facilitating community alliances that can reimagine public safety. right? And definitely the Alliance for Police Accountability has reached out to us. We're really looking forward to working with them in their new coalition. And in the long term, you know, we need that education. We need new forms of high school education on American racism, as well as the contributions that we have made as APIs, as Black Americans, as Latino Americans, as Indigenous communities.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was listening to NPR, earlier, and I forget who the expert was who was talking about this, but even, in the, kind of diversionary, narrative, of this addiction, that the man has still underlies that, a deep, deep history of the intersection, of race and gender, in the Western, perception of Asian women. So even, as they may even say, well, this was like an addiction, is deeply rooted, in a way that, Asian women are presented within Western society,
Yeah.
which was, just a powerful thing, to hear presented. I'm driving, and, in the car, listening to this, and it made me kind of stop and almost pull over, as your Asian woman, could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a very, very, important point, and it's obviously deeply connected to the way Black women are well as presented, in Western society. Is a very deep parallel that may I've never really connected until I thought about it this morning, really.
Yeah, thanks, Kahari, for that question. I mean, I think most women, regardless of their race, are very familiar with the experience of being objectified, right? But Asian American and Black women especially are oftentimes completely equated with their sexuality. Right. And for Asian American women too, this kind of colonial history that started in Western Europe and that the United States has definitely inherited. There is a kind of added stereotype of submissiveness and meekness. So that makes us really terribly vulnerable because many people think that we are not only equated with our sexuality, but that we are available sexually, right? And so that was kind of borne out last week in the Atlanta shootings, right? And the narrative around that. Why are we a temptation? And why are we oftentimes, just to take an example, I've been my entire adult life, when I go to bars and restaurants, right, there's this like very specific way of being hit on. And then when that person is rejected, or I turn away simply without talking to them, it can go from baby to a racial slur within the space of a minute, right? So, I mean, that kind of way of thinking about ownership, possessiveness of Asian women's bodies is historical and it's vicious.
Right, and we'll go around for a follow-up, but like the point that you're making is the same point that that the guest who was on NPR this morning, I wish I remembered the name, and she was saying the same thing. It's just things I never think about, right? I just never think about, like, literally, and she was saying the same way. It's like a certain thing. A lot of times, it's a former military, that spent time at American bases. In the Asian Pacific, and it's like this really just creepy kind of line of questioning, in this expectation, and then it's just things I just never thought about before, but it really blew me away, just hearing this kind of testimony, from and she was just saying it's just universal, with Asian women in Western society. It's just something that's going to happen. Like someone's going to come at you really sideways out of their neck for something really inappropriate. And I just never thought about that before, you know what I mean? And like when you talk about blind spot, it was just a blind spot that I had. That was just like, wow, like that's deep, so I just kind of just wanted, just to share that alignment that I had today. That's all part of this longer greater, more important conversation that that we're having about the intersection, of all these really, really powerful dynamics. But Ryan, would you like to follow up?
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. Yeah, and not to shift the topic of discussion, because that's definitely a really important point to talk about that a lot of people don't really pick up on to that extent. So thank you for discussing that. But I just wanted to give you the opportunity while we have you on here, just to talk about some of the other work that APA LA does, whether it be workers' rights, immigrant justice, just a lot of the other fields you're involved in that capacity.
Yeah, we're the local chapter, the Pittsburgh chapter of a larger national organization. And APALA is an organization of AAPI union members and allies that works on immigrants' rights, workers' rights, and civil rights. And so, in normal times, what we do a lot of the time is know your rights workshops for undocumented workers. We also do a lot of advocacy on immigration policy. So we speak with elected officials on what we'd like to see and what we definitely don't want to see in terms of immigration policy. What we've done this year is we've worked on census registration, get out the vote efforts. We've also done a lot of facilitation of aid to AAPI workers who are unable to tap into the stimulus. Right now, our major campaign is trying to get AAPI seniors and other eligible people to sign up for the COVID-19 vaccine, which is often difficult for people who don't know English very well or can't access the web. So that's what we're working. We're extremely busy, but please help us and become a member if you're interested in any of this work. We'd love to see you.
Absolutely. America, do you have a final question?
No, I think that's it. The reaching out, the support. I guess the best way right now to support is to become a member of APALA and just to show up on Wednesday. It's like very important. And again, we're having like a lot of these rough conversations. It's been like a rough year, and I think that the silver lining of all the negativity of the past like year and a half is that we've been forced to kind of have this reconciliation moment, and hopefully it creates, a just society where we don't have to have these experiences and where we understand fully people's humanity and have the opportunities to learn each other's histories, because obviously we can't keep going on the way that way it has been. So I do thank you so much, Judy, for coming, for reaching out. I do hope now you get a lot more support, a lot more coverage, and a lot more people participating, because it was a shame that people did not reach out to you before Tuesday, and I hope that is changing.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, One Hood.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so like I said, this morning, listening to NPR and in these conversations, I just feel like it's so important, particularly when we deal, with the intersection, of race, and gender, and you have these tough conversations, but we're willing to, put it on the table, particularly like I said, as a man, it's like this stuff that I just don't think about, and just over time, how demeaning and dehumanizing that is on a daily basis, to constantly be approached, from a perspective that strips away, 99% of your humanity and reduces you to a caricature. And obviously, we understand that, but it's just, it's from a different perspective. It's just something that I can understand, but never thought of. But it really hit me, you know what I mean? In a way, because it's like, man, that's deep. You know what I mean? That's just deep. And obviously there's things about, stories that we can tell about our experiences and microaggressions and outright discrimination that blows people away, the same way. But again, that's why we got to have these conversations, because oftentimes you think, well, it's just us that are, dealing with these microaggressions or dealing with these things, but there's really a whole range, across the spectrum that are dealing with discrimination and racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and stuff like that. And it's really hard to see until you unwrap that layer and get out of your own silo and your own box, and see the humanity, in someone else.
Yeah, I think people often forget when we talk about white supremacy, imperialism and colonialism is a part of that. And so a lot of the ways that, toxic masculinity treats women is now globalized because we do have a military base on every continent, right? And so we do have these characters from, the Hollywood stories that get churned out, and that's how we end up treating people in real life. And so it's very important when we're talking about whether we're assuming people are sex workers and we're devaluing them, or we're assuming people are a certain ethnicity and we're devaluing them. It's very important that we look at all of these intersections. And I think it's also important. That's why we have our next guest coming on, just to talk about when we're talking about gender and race and health and the environment. That is an intersection that we haven't really discussed until, the past few years, when we're looking at the ways in which the environment is really devastating Black and Brown communities. When you look at the numbers, and we have Alyssa, who's going to be joining us from UrbanKind, who is leading a roundtable and a coalition to look at the ways that the environment impacts our communities, and some of the things that we can do as a community to push back on that. So welcome.
Welcome.
Hey everyone, thanks. I'm really excited to be here with y'all. How's everyone doing?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us.
Oh no, of course.
Awesome. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what you do at UrbanKind.
Yeah, my name's Alyssa Lyon. I'm the director of the Black Environmental Collective at the UrbanKind Institute. Officially been here 3 weeks today. So super excited. Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited about really advocating on behalf of Black folks as it pertains to environmental justice. So here at the UrbanKind Institute, our goal, our mission is to remove barriers for families in overburdened and under-resourced places, period. Whatever barriers that are, we do that through community engagement and education. We do that through applied research, and we do that through programming as well. And one of the programs that we do that through is my program, which is the Black Environmental Collective, which we advance objectives of a priority-driven network that seeks to equip Black people with the tools to act and understand health threats and hazards to their food, safety, their place, the climate, environment. Basically, how do we put Black people's priorities around environmental justice in the forefront and really start to talk about what affects Black people the most? That's what the collective is here for.
Absolutely. I just have one quick follow-up question, and then we'll jump to Miracle and then Ryan. As someone who's, involved in environmental justice, and I spent some time doing, environmental work with the Blue Green Alliance as well as with Green for All, for a time. And, one of the challenges, we always have with, engaging particularly African American community around environmental justice, at least in the initial conversation. I think once we had that opportunity to engage, it was a much deeper conversation. But it was like, so often we would kind of get pushback in the beginning saying, well, I'm dealing with this economic issue over here. I'm dealing with this public safety issue over here. I'm dealing with this other issue over here. I really don't have time for like the panda bears, and and the fishes in the Amazon River, and not directly connecting conditions, that public safety issue or that economic issue actually is directly tied, to that EJ issue. So how do you, tackle with that? And, what's your message to folks that don't necessarily see the direct connection with the challenges they're facing immediately and environmental justice and how that's a part of it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And look, let me tell you, the balding eagles and the polar bears and the dying crocodiles, those things are all very important to the world ecosystem. But I think the problem that we're having with marginalized groups, especially Black folks, especially people who are in poverty or people who are experiencing the under-resourced side of just kind of healthy living, it's not connected to day-to-day. And I have to tell you that the environmental justice movement has been hijacked by this sustainability thing. Environmental justice is a civil rights issue, period. It has been since the beginning of time. Black people in this country, since we were brought here, have been experiencing and have been victims of horrific environmental places, from being on slave ships to being in slavery to Jim Crow to living in spaces that don't even have green spaces, that don't even have a park. And so what we have to stop doing is acting as though climate change is happening around us and start acting like it's happening to us. I do live in Braddock. Y'all mentioned Braddock, and shout out to Mayor Joelisa, who's the mayor of Rankin, which is right around the corner from here. But my fiance and I, we made a conscious decision to buy a house in a Black community, and that house is down the street from a plant. My allergies have gotten worse. It's difficult to breathe. We can smell rotten eggs in the air. Those kinds of things have an effect on your mood, that have an effect on how you're going to show up for the day. And I know we don't recognize it, but I've been engaged. I have engaged with people in Black communities in Pittsburgh, such as Homewood, the Hill District, Hazelwood, those kinds of places, and they're starting to make the correlations between why their asthma is so bad and why they can't drink certain things, or a lot of the places they live in are food swamps. You know, moving away from this idea of food desertion, we got food in Black communities, but it's hot flaming Cheetos and it's your Philly cheesesteak, and it's not access to your greens and stuff. So we're swamped with bad things, and we're deserted from the good things. And so there are day-to-day interactions that you're having with your community that other people aren't having with their community. They have parks, they have trees, they don't have plants down the street from their homes. Those things you're interacting with, and they cause long-term dis-ease, not just in your mood swing, but in your body. That is literally the formation of disease. And so you have materials out in the air, you have the buildings you're living in are old. Those kinds of things you're breathing in every single day, they cause discomfort. It's not, you know, it's not happening around us. Climate change is literally happening day to day with us. And we need to start talking about that and making it relevant to folks daily. And not burden them with the information, just simply couple it with what they already have.
Right. Miracle?
Yeah, thank you for that. I was kind of introduced to environmental justice for reproductive justice work because I was talking about, you know, making sure people are healthy enough to have children and to carry children, thinking about some of the reasons why children are born underweight in Black and brown communities due to the air quality, due to the situation with the lead and the water, and even the lack of diet. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the partners that you're looking with to collaborate at this table so that you're able to be more effective as you push this message of environmental justice?
Sure. I just want to say that the Black Environmental Collective, although it was born out of this informal desire for people who are doing similar work in the environmental justice movement to kind of just rally, to meet up, to share resources, to share ideas, to share information. And now we think that it's so valuable that it needs to have its own table, it needs to have its own platform, and it needs to have its own direction. And so the collective is made up of about 100 to 150 people throughout the southwestern region of Pennsylvania, and it spans to even Harrisburg and Philadelphia and Erie. And we are all kind of working together collectively to talk about environmental justice concerns as it pertains to marginalized communities. Now, specifically working in the collective, I mean, there are many amazing folks in the region doing environmental justice works. You have Bugs, which is the Black Urban Gardeners. You have the Breathe Network, which really talks about air, asthma. You have the Southwestern PA Cancer-Free Economy Network. They're talking about carcinogens in the air, and they want to make sure that they're establishing some kind of declaration for cross-sectoral collaboration to make a true and tried commitment to reduce the amount of carcinogens in the air that add to cancer creation and formation in the region. You have the Homewood Children's Village, who has a climate change, health, and equity curriculum that they deliver specifically to residents and pay residents to participate in that curriculum. And they're learning about everything from neighborhood style frameworks. They're talking to their elected officials about environmental justice concerns. They're talking about data as it pertains to climate change, health, and equity. You have Reverend Paul Abernathy in the Hill District and in other neighborhoods. It started in the Hill District. They have neighborhood health ambassadors. One thing that was born out of the COVID crisis was the Black Equity Coalition. Amazing people and amazing experts from the region coming together to talk about COVID in Black communities, to talk about how they're bringing resources there. They recently came together and did a whole bunch of a big vaccination kind of drive and push in these communities that they care about. I mean, there are so many people out there working on environmental justice for these marginalized communities. I suggest you get involved with the Black Environmental Collective, because if you want to talk to those folks, I'm sure we'll have a connection to those folks as well. So many folks out there. One PA, want to shout them out as well, doing amazing work as well.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to Ryan for a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and thank you for joining us as well, Alyssa. So I just wanted to talk about, so obviously you're a Black collective working in this space of environmental work, which traditionally and to a pretty solid extent still to this day is a space that's been pretty heavily dominated by a lot of white voices, a lot of white-led organizations, and the concerns of Black communities, which are often most severely impacted by these environmental concerns, are kind of underrepresented in those discussions. So as a Black collective operating in this space, just really what are you doing, or how are you finding yourselves able to really focus on amplifying and centering these Black voices and the concerns of Black and other communities of color that are most heavily impacted by these issues a lot of the time, but at the same time have often been underrepresented in these discussions.
Yeah, that Ryan, and thanks for, it's nice to meet and thanks to be here. But that's the thing we're trying to figure out, right? Hopefully within the next year, we can sit down and really talk about strategic planning for the collective and what are the pillars that are going to hold up the collective and how are we going to push our mission forward. And so hopefully we can create a resource of like a pipeline for education for these communities. There's a large gap in environmental justice and sustainability education in these communities. As they're heading into comprehensive neighborhood planning, we're using language and lingo like the UN SDGs and EcoDistricts, and we have to talk to our residents first about this language before they can partake. How do we advocate for the reallocation of resources? So I think the goal for the collective is to become this super desirable and this super necessary kind of collective of people who are establishing Black priorities of environmental justice as the first priority for them, and really ingraining it and integrating it into their programming. We also have, let's be honest, there are communities, like you said, Ryan, that are really white. We're getting ready potentially to work in Penn Trafford, right? Super white area, but they came to us to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice work. We also have workshops where we can talk about how can you be culturally relevant when you're trying to do this work. A lot of folks in environmental justice, community development in general, we think we're going in to be well-intended and heal, and we're actually causing harm. So we really do talk to our allies. We really do talk to folks around cultural relevancy as well. And so, how do we advocate? How do we educate? How do we help reallocate? How do we convene? And how do we become so necessary that when people ask to be involved in these Black priorities, we can say, hey, you have to be uncomfortable to show up in a space that's authentic to Black folks. So our job really here is to teach and really kind of be the it place for Black priorities. We don't know how we're going to do that yet. And hopefully in our strategic plan, we could figure it out. But I'm certain that we have the advocates. I'm certain we have the partners. And I'm certain we have the passion to kind of push that forward. So right now, like I said, it's been informal convenings, but we're looking to add to that. And so that's my 1-year vision for next year. So we'll get there, and I can report back to y'all as soon as that comes to fruition.
Absolutely. And from your perspective, and maybe this might be part of, that process that you're about to, undertake, but is there any particular like public policy, issues or public policy solutions even that you see that if implemented, like if you could wave your magic wand, that you would like to see addressed, for the Pittsburgh region, particularly around environmental justice?
I've had a lot of questions. I've never really thought about what that would look like. The one thing that it's always tripped me up are outdated policies and the enforcement of enforcement of policies. I don't think a lot of these things are going to change until we start enforcing policies that are just and equitable for groups, in my case, especially Black folks. We can't keep giving passes to bad landlords or whoever, bad business owners or whomever comes into our neighborhoods. And I would rather want to just see a more robust engagement of residents and people who are experts of the places in which they live, and those actually being incorporated and used and followed through on. I would first and foremost want y'all to listen to Black folks. We most of the time are not wrong. So I like to believe that we are the experts of where we live. I'd like to believe that we know what's best for ourselves. And so if you start taking some of those things that we're saying and literally just plopping it into our policy, for example, racism as a public health crisis took way too long for us to get to that point. And as the speaker before us that came on, America, we have to get to the root of white supremacy and white terrorism before we can stop any kind of other marginalized hate. So we need to start enforcing that with just and equitable policies and practices, and really start walking the walk. That's what I want to see. No more lip service. If you want me to keep it 100 with you.
Absolutely. Now we appreciate that. We love that. In our last few minutes, Miracle, do you have anything? Any more questions or anything?
Yeah. One, yes. Talk to Black people, ask Black people, pay Black people, promote Black people, all of that. So I'm very excited about what you have coming up. And you talked a little bit about what your goals are for the first year. Same question I'm gonna ask the mayor. This first 100 days, what does it look like for you? And how can people get in contact with you to join this collective?
Yeah, first 100 days, I'm doing a lot of listening, a lot of hanging out with my staff, as you guys can imagine. Interacting with his staff virtually and a new team is going to be difficult, but hopefully we'll see each other in about a month or so. We are having a Black environmental convening in late April. So please look out for a date for that as well. And we'll be convening right now, subsequently after that, bi-monthly. So the next meeting will be in June. And then hopefully we'll get together with our advisory board and start strategic planning. So we will be public facing as we're doing work on the back end. And the same time, you can also check out UrbanKind Institute's website for all the programming that they have going on. We have a great equitable, just Greater Pittsburgh platform. We have young Black futures that we have programming there. So check out the Black Environmental Collective, check out the UrbanKind Institute. We're doing amazing things. And we'll be here. We'll be loud. And so just brace yourselves for it. And thank you guys for having me. Really, really great to be here. Y'all doing great work.
Thank you so much. Alyssa Lyon from the Black Environmental Collective and the UrbanKind Institute joining us. Thank you so much. We look forward to being in touch with you, and me, particularly myself with an environmental background and spent about a decade doing environmental work. Definitely looking forward to connecting and, and comparing notes as well. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Y'all have my email address. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, Alyssa Lyon from the Black Environmental Collective and the UrbanKind Institute, rounding out our incredible panel of guests this evening. Wow. Talked to a newly minted mayor, workforce development specialist, advocate for Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and rounding it out with environmental justice. Yeah, so man, I think this was, one of the deepest, most wide-ranging conversations we had yet, and really just want to thank, all of our guests for joining us.
Yeah, and then Ryan, do you want to talk about our show for next week?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Miracle. Yeah, so next week we'll be, starting a special series that we'll be doing within the context of the Power Hour. It's going to be a legislative visit, essentially. So our guests are all going to be state legislators. We're going to do that starting next week, once a month in the last week of every month. And it's where, we speak to legislators all working on one specific issue, so we can really zero in on that. So next week we'll be talking to a few of the state legislators that are currently working on the Juvenile Justice Task Force, which is currently putting together recommendations, which the recommendations were supposed to come out last week originally, and I believe they got delayed till March 31st. So we'll be able to talk to them about that process next week. But yeah, we'll be able to talk to a few of the legislators who are working on that task force to put together recommendations as far as trying to reform a lot of the ways that the juveniles are sentenced and introduced into the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania. That we feel pretty optimistic about and are obviously very interested in that work. We'll be speaking to Representative Mike Zabel and Senator Jay Costa, and likely one or two other state legislators as well. So, it should be a really informative, interesting, in-depth conversation on that issue.
Absolutely. And also at Sunday night at 7, we will also be back for a third edition of the Sunday night sit down. But to run down the rest of this week's programming, I'm going to pass it back to the illustrious Miracle Jones.
Okay, so we know it's a start of a new year, start of an election season. If you have not registered to vote, if you are 18, going to be 18 by May 18th, and are a resident of Allegheny County and a citizen, you are eligible to vote. Please make sure you are registered to vote. Tomorrow at 2:00 for What Black Pittsburgh Needs to Know, we are going to be talking about the judiciary. As you may know, this is an unprecedented time. I know everyone hates that word now, but this is really an unprecedented time in Pennsylvania history where we have an opportunity to elect judges from the magistrate level all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And so actually Kahari is going to be one of the guests on the show tomorrow talking about what Black Pittsburgh needs to know. On Wednesday at 6 p.m., we are going to be talking about white supremacy. For This Week in White Supremacy, you know that is our most lively, not safe for work show, but we want you all to tune in just to learn about how we break down the system of white supremacy and dismantle it so we can all just be out here living safe and free and happy and liberated. And then we have, as it's the end of the month, the last Saturday, we have, the Next Level Slam, the Poetry Slam. Vanessa German is going to be a guest judge for our Poetry Slam. We'll have also DJ Amani playing music. So it's going to be a very interesting day as we kick off, Women's History Month. So please join us for our programming. And of course, if there's a story that we haven't covered, is there a conversation that you would like us to talk about, please reach out to us. We are always sending out information. We're always sending out emails to elected officials. Sometimes they don't respond to us, but we really want to have these stories that are about us, told by us, and that include us and center us. So please reach out. If you're an organizer, if you're a politician, we are here, we're open, and we're available to have you come onto our shows. So please reach out to us. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kahari.
Thank you so much for that, Miracle. Again, and I guess for those who are so inclined can join us tomorrow on what Black Pittsburgh needs to know. I will be sharing a lot of information about the various judicial seats, as well as the numerous referenda that are going to be on the ballot as well. So be sure to check that out. And be sure to check us out Sunday night at 7 for the next Sunday night sit down. Look for an announcement about that in the next day or two. And join us next Monday again for our first monthly legislative legislative town hall with State Representative Mike Zabel and the Democratic leader of the Pennsylvania Senate, Allegheny County's Jay Costa. So until then, stay engaged, stay involved, and most importantly, continue to stay safe. You know, as we continue to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I know folks are getting vaccinations and stuff like that. And in coming weeks, I'll share my own vaccination story, but I did get my second Moderna shot last Wednesday. But, you know, even though, you know, a lot of us are getting our first shots, our second shots, or our Johnson & Johnson shots, you know, we still can't, you know, be out here wilding yet. There will be a time when we're allowed to wild out, and that'll come in the near future. And we will wait till that time to appropriate wild out as my dog starts to wild out right now. But thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and I'll see you next Monday. Good night.